Salutations, everyone. This is Razor giving you guys my first impressions, my thoughts, early review on the Mass Effect Andromeda multiplayer. As we all know, the early access grants us 10 hours to play with that you can split between single player and multiplayer. I've decided to use all my time with the multiplayer, considering I have just short of 1,000 hours in Mass Effect 3 multiplayer. I know what to look for, I know what I'm talking about, and I'm excited for all of the things. And I also was in the closed alpha for the game, so I have a little bit more than 10 hours, you could say. Probably more, around a day or so played by the time I finish my early access time. So there's a lot to talk about in this multiplayer that has essentially removed almost every single problem that Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which was awesome, but it had, a lot of issues that we all had with it. And for the most part, a lot of those issues have been fixed. There's no Omni Button, so you take cover with the analog stick, you jump with A, and then you have the booster with B, and then the melee gets switched to Y. And the objectives are now to hold down Y as well. So at the most, when it comes to button-related issues, you'll be meleeing somebody instead of reviving them because you weren't close enough, or you're right next to the objective and you accidentally melee. But for the most part, those problems of the Omni Button have been greatly diminished, and we can go back to just having all the kinds of funs that we have. So all of the changes, the boosters, having everybody more mobile, being able to jump with all the characters, it's super fluid, it's super duper natural. Everyone has an aerial melee, which is really awesome way to initiate a fight, or to finish one off. The melee, as it stands, vanilla without speccing into a melee build, is pretty decent. At least at the lower levels. Obviously, if you're going to want to do melee, spec into a melee build if you're going to be going, for gold or something like that. But overall, as the melee, the base level of the melee seems pretty strong, and especially the heavy melee coming down from the air. There's no longer, a light melee or heavy melee. You have the ground pound melee, and you have your regular melee, and then you have a sprinting version of that regular melee to give you a little bit of extra range. So for instance, the Krogan no longer has the shoulder throw, but he still has the headbutt, and the headbutt has a bit of extra range, especially if you sprint, then headbutt. You'll mostly get the same effect and get your rage activated and all that good stuff, which isn't obscuring the screen as much as Blood Rage did in Mass Effect 3. Another issue that was fixed from the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer was the way that combos are, relate to one another. Everything primes for everything, and everything detonates everything. So if something's caught in a singularity, you can detonate that with, energy drain. Or if something has been, cryo frozen, you can, get the throw for the explosion. Or if, somebody's, basically everything primes for everything. And it makes for a lot of cool different synergies. And obviously some of the powers have been reworked. For instance, concussion shot can now detonate tech and biotic explosions. There's no real changes to Nova. That doesn't, detonate or prime. You can have it prime in one evolution, I believe, but that's only, for a couple of seconds. So there's definitely a lot of different ways to get explosions to be detonated in this game than in ME3. Overall, the cooldowns seem to be much higher. Like, for instance, Shockwave has a base 15-second cooldown. Singularity has a much longer cooldown than an ME3 as well. Obviously, when you spec into it, you'll be able to mitigate that, and as well as, with some of the boosters that we have available to us. There's also equipment in this game, not just ammo or, a rail amp or, a cyclonic modulator, but there's also equipment. And everything runs off of power cells instead of grenades, so it's a lot less confusing to newcomers, where they might not notice that something runs off of grenades even when it's not a grenade. Here they're called power cells, and everything runs off of those instead of grenade capacity. So a little bit of fixture in the nomenclature there, which should help some people. As far as the connection goes, we're still have to do a lot more testing on, what is viable on and off host. Are we going to have some powers that really can't be used off host, much like we had with some characters or, some weapons. The connection might not be great, especially if, you have a transatlantic connection or something like that, to where sniping or a biotic power isn't going to, have the desired effect or the effect that it can have if you're on host. Obviously, if you're on host, you're going to have a better connection. That's just the way that it works. But if those problems, as far as those problems persisting from ME3 to ME2, as far as like, say, Phase Disruptor was unusable off host in ME3 because you weren't able to get as many off. Just because of the weird way that the end lag dealt with Phase Disruptor when you were off host. But we're gonna have to. We haven't played with every single power, and obviously we can't really comment on the difficulty of, say, like gold, because we don't have all of our characters to level rank 20, and we aren't going to be doing dual or solo plat golds or solo golds anytime soon. There is no platinum difficulty. They hadn't planned on it. There might be some complications with getting all the different factions to work. And when it comes to the faction that you face, you have the Kets, which is, the main antagonistic alien race, as it would seem in the campaign. There is also the robots that you might have seen in some of the early campaign reveals. And there's also a mercenary-esque group that has Turians and Solarians and humans and Asari and Angaras all, working together. So they all have their own challenges. Some are going to be more vulnerable to, tech explosions if they have a ton of shields, and some are going to have more armor. Some are going to be more mobile. Some are going to camp and snipe. So they're all going to present their own fun challenges. As far as the weapons go, everything's handled pretty much exactly the same as far as weapons and consumables go, outside of the fact that they switched med ops and ammo pack on the directional pad for your consumables. I don't know why they made that switch. When I asked them, I really didn't understand their reasoning for why they switched it, but they switched it. So that's something that we're all going to have to get used to. And eventually I'm sure that we all will, since we're not going to be going back and forth between ME3 and MEA multiplayers, I would assume, for the most of us. But the guns, the weapons, seem fairly nice. Everything has been changed as far as rarity goes. You're still going to have your uncommons, your rares, and your ultra rares, but the rarer the gun is, the better it's going to be. So it's not going to be like ME3 where you get, the ultra rare Valiant, and the Valiant isn't even as good as the Mantis, which is, a common weapon that you would start with. So if the gun's rarer, it's going to be a better gun. So we're not going to have, those, I got an ultra rare, but it was a bad ultra rare. They're all going to be pretty good. We've also seen improvements to, existing guns. The Disciple is a lot better than it was in ME3. The Phalanx is better. The Viper is a little bit better, and that's the starting sniper you deal with, unfortunately. Pretty much all of your returning powers are going to have somewhat similar but different Evo trees. To some of them might not be a primer, but there's an evolution that will make it a primer, such as Energy Drain. Or there will some things that won't run off of power cells, like Concussion Shot, which is just a power that's on cooldown. But there's an evolution to make it run off of power cells, but have it, do more damage and allow you to do more damage once the opponent is knocked down. So there's a lot of different factors going into each power, even if they are returning powers. I feel like the ammo mods are going to have a much bigger impact just because of everything detonates for everything now. So the ammos are going to play a much bigger role, and they're going to have a much bigger impact. These Hydras are basically Atlases that can fly. They do have a weak spot on the giant cylinder on their back, on the top of their neck. So, and the Fiends also have like these red scales on their back. So everything has, as far as I can tell, everything has a critical hit, a weak point, and that is also a new medal if you get, a certain amount of weak point hits, and it'll give you a special hit marker if you get the critical hit, and it has a slightly different sound effect that's, so it's all pretty entertaining and pretty well done as far as everything goes. And As you can see, we're going up against the mercenary group here. I forget what they're called. And as far as objective goes, here's one of the new ones, data transfer, which is basically 3 hacks. The more people you have on it, the faster it will go. And that's going to make, shepherding people around that aren't going to be playing the objective. It's going to make that super difficult. It's going to make clutching a lot more difficult, this one, as well as, getting those solo games. Just because these hacks are going to take so long. And the fact that there's 3 of them, obviously there's still, central one-stop shop hacks that, might present themselves depending on the map and the location on that map. And we still have devices. They function pretty much the same way outside of the fact that you use the Y button now. And you'll still have targets. No pizza delivery seems to be returning at this juncture. Obviously, they can always change how certain enemies attack. We saw what happened with the Geth in ME3. They used to be the worst, and then they became like one of the strongest to deal with. You couldn't be able to grab pyros, and primes could sync kill and all that good. Can't sync kill and all that good stuff. So they might change how some of the objectives work, or maybe how some of the enemies go attack, as far as their patterns go. But the AI seems to be rather resourceful. A lot of the powers, both new and returning ones, see a lot of viability. Obviously, there are going to be some character kits, some of your basically your basic vanilla humans aren't going to be so great, but that's what you start with. Bronze is relatively easy as long as you have a decent connection and at least one other person who's playing the objective with you. Silver, basically bronze and silver feel pretty much the same as they were in ME3. Silver isn't a really big step up from bronze. So, once you get a strong enough character up to level 20, or you feel like you have the power synergies for priming and detonating down well enough, then you'll be able to go to silver, as long as the people that you're playing with are going to also help with the objective and have maybe some competent weapons. So the store works pretty much the same. You can also buy individual equipment if you wish. If you're running low on Cobra missile launchers, or med packs, or ammo packs, or metagel, or first aid, whatever they're calling it here. You can buy those individually with your mission funds, which you get through, Apex missions and things like that. And you can do Apex missions, which is obviously a new thing to the multiplayer, which are specific types of, they choose the faction and the winning conditions and the map. So there's just going to be fun little extra challenges to do, and you'll be able to buy things with mission funds, such as the equipment that I stated earlier, as well as respec cards. So if you don't want to wait to get a respec card in any of your packs, you can just straight up buy one, which is super nice, considering we're going to have to do so much trial and error on what's going to be the best way to build all of these new classes. So that's going to be super fun. And also, supposedly, as was revealed a few months ago, we'll be able to buy specific weapons available, a small amount of them each. I forget if it was monthly or bi-monthly, but those will be purchasable with mission funds, and you'll supposedly be able to do something with mission funds in single player as well. But there's no connection between multiplayer and single player. One isn't going to affect the other, so you don't have to play multiplayer if you don't want to, and playing a ton of multiplayer isn't going to help you in single player. So those are basically my initial thoughts of the game. There's one problem that has carried over from ME3 MP, and it's even worse in this game, and that are the sound cues. If you remember Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, the sound wouldn't always come from where the enemy is. Well, here it seems to be even worse, to where at many times, if there's especially a ton of enemies in the vicinity, the sound cues are going to mean absolutely nothing and help you not at all. So that's a bit of a problem. But to help with that, we do have a compass now, which shows with red dots where all the enemies are, as well as your objectives. So that's pretty nice. I love the changes that they've made. Obviously there were some bugs in the alpha that I had to deal with, and I knew were going to be fixed. There were some issues with certain animations and certain melees and certain enemies that have been fixed. So it's very promising. Obviously, this game's going to get free DLC for multiplayer, and they're going to have updates, trying to tweak things, maybe nerf some weapons as we saw, but hopefully they do it much better this time and not take something like the Falcon, which was pretty darn good, and then nerf it to almost uselessness and then come out with weapons that are even better than the Falcon could ever hope to be. So it's going to be a long trial of as far as balance and the meta works in this game, but it's going to be a fun ride, and I can't wait to get more.